The first shot hit the Powder River before sunrise, and Harlan Shaw rode into the water because the boy on the far bank was one he knew. The child was crouched in the cottonwoods with a rope in one hand and a frightened paint mare behind him. He could not have been more than 12. Mud streaked his bare shins. His chest was pumping so hard Harlan could see it from the saddle. On the ridge above, 3 men from Buffalo Creek were spreading out with rifles across their pommels, and one of them was Nate Purdy, who had eaten at Harlan's table often enough to know the difference between hunger and theft. "Move away from him," Nate shouted. "Sheriff's order." Harlan kept riding until river water slapped cold against his boots. "That order includes shooting children?" Nate's jaw worked. "That order includes stopping horse thieves." The boy did not run. Smart child. Running made nervous men feel righteous. He only looked at Harlan with the wild, trapped stare of something hunted too early in life. "Get behind my horse," Harlan said. The boy obeyed at once. Another rifle cracked. Spray jumped from the river an arm's length away. That was how war found Harlan's ranch. Not with trumpets. Not with speeches. It came in the shape of a neighbor aiming at a hungry child and calling it law. Before we go on, tell us in the comments where you're listening from tonight. It does a heart good to know who is riding with the story after dark. Nate reined closer to the bank. 6 head were taken off Miller land in the night. Sheriff says no Cheyenne crosses east till the army sorts this out. Harlan looked at the mare again. No Miller brand. No fresh iron. Only an old rub scar at the shoulder. Harlan noticed such things the way some men noticed weather. He had built a ranch in the Powder River country by reading brands, hoof cuts, and grass sign better than most men read ledgers. "That horse isn't Miller stock," he said. Nate shrugged too fast. "Boy had it. That's not the same thing." The wind shifted, carrying river mud, horse sweat, and old reeds. Beyond the cottonwoods, the basin rolled away under a pale sky. The river laid through sage like dull tin. Then wagon wheels rattled on stone behind the riders. Lena Redbird stood in the wagon bed, one hand braced on the seat rail, her dark braid half loose and whipping in the morning wind. She wore a plain brown dress under a man's coat too broad at the shoulder, and she looked the way she always looked when trouble came, tired, upright, and entirely unwilling to bend for it. "Take one more shot," she called, "and I'll see if your courage lasts all the way to a judge's desk." The 3 riders laughed because men like that often did, but none of them fired again. Lena climbed down, stepped straight into the shallows, and put a hand on the boy's neck. He leaned against her at once. Only then did she look at Harlan. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He had not heard her speak gently to him in years. Nate tapped the breast pocket of his vest. "Order came through town last night. Treaty markers changed. No hunting. No grazing. No crossing. Anyone does is trespassing at best and rustling at worst." Lena went still. "There is no such order." "There is now." Harlan felt an old chill move through him. He had seen paper do more damage than weather. Paper had taken Ellen's burial orchard when railroad surveyors decided a spur line mattered more than graves. Paper had once promised Lena's family and a handful of ranchers winter use of the Red Willow meadow, so ponies and cattle could live through hard snow together. Men had signed that agreement with full stomachs and warm hands. Now men were using another paper to tell children they could be shot at the river. "Show it to me in town," Harlan said. Nate stared. "You planning to read it on their side or ours?" Harlan looked at the boy, then at Lena, then back at the man who had once helped him pull a calf in sleet, and now spoke as if decency were a luxury. He thought of Ellen dying while he rode a frozen road searching for a sober doctor. He thought of how most terrible things did not begin in gunfire. They began in a moment when a person saw wrong clearly and still decided silence was safer. "On the side that still knows a lie," he said. He rode back with Lena's wagon toward Red Willow. The boy, Eli, Lena's nephew, hidden under a blanket in the rear as if daylight itself had become dangerous. The road rose above the river and ran through bunchgrass, sage, and dust pale enough to taste. By the time the sun cleared fully, the back of Harlan's throat felt coated in grit. After a while Lena said, "You should not have stepped between them. You'd rather I let them shoot him?" "I'd rather the world not punish every decent act. That leaves us little work." For an instant the corner of her mouth moved. Then it was gone. 5 years earlier, in the hard winter, Lena's husband Thomas had hauled elk meat and pine wood to Harlan's place and saved Harlan and Ellen from starving. Later, Thomas took scout wages when new fighting rose over treaty land. He came home on a travois with a bullet through him and 3 different stories from 3 white men about how it happened. At the burial, she had said to Harlan, "You told him service might keep us safe." He had no defense then. None now. Red Willow sat in a cottonwood bend where the creek made good grass and a little shelter. Cabins, 2 lodges, horse pens, women stripping willow bark in the shade. The sort of place town men called temporary because they feared anything rooted outside their fences. Gabriel Redbird, Lena's younger brother, came out first. He was broad-shouldered, hard-faced, and carrying the kind of anger that made even stillness seem armed. With him stood Amos Pike, a white former buffalo hunter who had married into Lena's family and never once tried to act brave about what that had cost him. Gabriel saw Harlan and stopped. "Why is he here?" "Because Eli is alive," Lena said. That answered enough for the moment. Inside Lena's cabin, the air smelled of willow bark and smoke. She spread an old agreement on the table. Winter use rights for Red Willow Meadow, shared in hard snow, signed years earlier by officers, local families, and 3 ranchers, one of them Harlan Shaw. "That paper is why today's order is false," Lena said. Amos leaned in the doorway. "And because it's false, Silas Creed needs folks frightened enough not to ask questions." Harlan looked up. "Creed filed the theft complaint. Sheriff says on behalf of the district." Gabriel snorted. "Creed means to fence the creek by spring. Water, hay, burial hill. He wants all of it." Lena tapped the map line. "Yesterday, agency riders moved new survey markers west of the old ones. No witness from our side. If the line stands, we lose the meadow." "And the hill?" Harlan asked. "And the hill. That was the true wound. Not pasture. Graves. Men might argue over cattle. They started wars over bones." Harlan stood very still. Somewhere inside him an old, obedient piece cracked clean in 2. He had spent too many years believing that if he minded his stock, paid his note, and stayed out of louder men's business, life might spare what little he had left. But life had already proved otherwise. "I'm going to town," he said. Gabriel folded his arms. "And when town says the paper in your hand means less than the paper in Creed's, then I'll know whose hand is on the lie." Lena folded the agreement again. "You won't go alone." At dawn they rode for Buffalo Creek. The town looked armed from half a mile out. Men stood in front of every store too still for a normal day. Rifles rested in doorways. The church bell rope was tied high. Even the dogs kept to the shade. Sheriff Ezra Vale waited outside the courthouse with Silas Creed beside him. Vale had once settled fights with a sigh. Now worry had narrowed him. Creed looked the opposite. Clean vest, bright watch chain, every inch of him arranged to suggest control. "Well," Creed said when Harlan and Lena dismounted. "The peace delegation." "Show me the order," Lena said. Creed smiled without warmth. "There's the difficulty with temporary arrangements. Give people one kindness, and soon they mistake it for law." "Careful," Harlan said. Creed glanced at him. "Or what? You'll judge me by hoof marks." "As a matter of fact, yes." Harlan nodded toward a chestnut gelding at the hitch rail. "That horse carries Miller's crooked M under your Circle K. Burned over badly. White hair's already coming through the edges." Several heads turned. Creed's smile thinned. "Bought him fair." "From whom?" Creed spread a hand. "Do I keep account of every nag in my yard?" "If you accuse children of theft," Lena said, "you should." Vale cleared his throat and ushered them inside. The order on Vale's desk bore an agency seal and voided prior winter use agreements pending security review and revised survey conclusions. No tribal witness. No local signer. Just neat language erasing 10 years. "It's a fraud," Lena said. "It's official," Creed replied. Harlan read it again. Near the bottom sat the hinge. "Pending investigation into recent stock thefts east of Red Willow." "Who filed the complaint?" Harlan asked. "I did," Creed said. "You ever see Red Willow people take those cattle?" Lena asked. "I saw enough." "You saw tracks?" Harlan said. "I saw results." "That means no." Creed leaned one palm on the desk. "What it means is this county is tired of feeding snakes in winter and being bitten by spring." Vale flinched, but he did not stop him. Harlan spoke quietly. Miller's stock were cut from his north pasture. Riders headed for Red Willow would use timber or river wash, not open rise by your south fence. Either your thieves were fools, or your story is. The room cooled. Truth had landed. Creed looked at Vale. "By sundown tomorrow, Red Willow clears the East Meadow and surrenders any unmarked stock. If not, I'll deputize enough men to do the work. Lena said, You mean to steal burial ground and call it order? I mean to preserve civilization. Her eyes never left his. Civilization is a tidy word cruel men use when they want cleaner sleeves. Someone in the doorway muttered a low amen. Creed turned to Harlan. And you? Your calves cross my shipping yard. Your mortgage is held by a bank whose board I know well. Where do you stand? That was the true blade at Harlan's throat. Not a rifle. Debt. Winter feed. Rail access. A life that could be pinched shut by men who never carried water in drought. He thought of Ellen. Of Thomas. Of Eli in the river reeds. Of every small cowardice that had ever dressed itself as prudence. He said, A ranch built by cowardice isn't worth the fence around it. If you had stood there with your living on one side and your conscience on the other, what would you have done? Kept quiet for one more season? Or spoken when it could cost everything? Tell us in the comments. Creed's face emptied of pretense. Sheriff, take his rifle. Vale hesitated. That single heartbeat almost saved the town. Then the courthouse door flew open and Nate Purdy stumbled in, hatless and pale. They found Tom Weller, he said, down by the lower wash. Shot dead. Horse gone. Every eye in the room swung toward Lena. Creed did not raise his voice. There's your answer. Lena's face went still as cut stone. Tom Weller brought medicine to my aunt last winter. He mended Eli's snare with his own hands. Do not hang your debt on us, because it suits a theft. But outside, someone had freed the church bell rope. By the time the bell stopped, Buffalo Creek was under fever. Men rode in from outlying places with whatever rumor reached them first, and each rumor came back uglier. A deputy dead. Children stealing horses. Hostiles crossing treaty lines. By late afternoon, porches held ammunition and the livery was full of saddled horses. Vale tried once, ordering no vigilante ride until Weller's killer was known. But Creed moved through the crowd like a man setting kindling. Fear did the rest. Harlan and Lena slipped out behind the blacksmith shop. She had the agreements under her coat. He still had his rifle only because worse trouble had interrupted the argument. At the alley mouth, Lena stopped. Weller's missing horse stood by the watering trough. No blood on the saddle. Reins neatly looped. And on the right hind, shoe one nail shone brighter than the others, freshly reset. Harlan had seen that nail before. Creed's bay at the feed store, he said. Lena looked at him sharply. You're sure? I'd swear before God. He crouched. Horse came hard, not far. They changed mounts after the shooting. So Weller never rode out of town alive. No. Hoofbeats pounded at the far end of the alley. They ran. Across the Cooper yard. Between the smithy and the grain shed. Over rails behind the boarding house. A bullet smashed a post by Harlan's ear. Lena only clutched the papers tighter and kept moving. They dropped behind the livery. Two boys were forking hay in the rear stall. Take my mare through Kettle Lane, Harlan told them. East Wash. Don't stop. The older boy saw his face and obeyed without question. A shadow moved by the back gate. Gabriel Redbird stepped through with Amos and 3 riders from Red Willow. We guessed town would sour, Gabriel said. Turns out we guessed low. You should not have come, Lena told him. You don't get to decide that alone anymore. There was no time left for argument. Men were already shouting that Shaw had been taken hostage by Indians, proof enough that lies never feared embarrassment. They rode north toward the bluffs instead of south toward home. Harlan chose the ground because Creed would expect love to run straight. The climb into the bluffs was narrow and shale steep. Evening wind came colder there, carrying juniper and cooling stone. Below, Buffalo Creek lit its lamps one by one. Lanterns appeared on the lower trail behind them. They split, Gabriel said. Some for us. Some for Red Willow. Then we buy time here, Harlan said. He led them into a box canyon he knew from calving season, with one entrance and a rear slot hidden behind broken rock. Years earlier, he had stocked a line shack there against blizzards. He had never imagined using it against neighbors. By full dark, they were inside. Eli sat under Amos's coat by the stove. Gabriel took the upper sheep path. Lena spread the papers on a bunk beneath the lamp. Harlan studied the false order again. These initials here. J.B. Lena leaned closer. James Barlow. He copied the old agreement for Major Bell. Where is he now? Creed hired him at the shipping yard this spring. Gabriel gave a humorless huff from the doorway. So the same hand writes the promise and the grave notice. A pebble ticked down the canyon wall. Everyone went quiet. Nate Purdy's voice floated in from the dark. Harlan, don't make this worse. Turn over the papers and the Redbirds, and folks will say you were misled. Harlan stepped to the door. You always were generous with another man's honor, Nate. I'm trying to save your life. No, you're trying to save your place in line. Silence answered. Then Creed called from farther back, voice smooth and patient. You have until dawn. No one trusted that. They watched in turns. The night grew cold enough for the rifle barrel to bite Harlan's palm. Near midnight, Lena came out with bitter coffee and sat beside him on the step. You were right about Thomas, she said. Harlan stared into the canyon dark. No, you told him soldiers use men until they are done with them, she said. I blamed the wrong part of that memory. He exhaled slowly. I told him what I wanted to believe. Ellen was sick. Feed was low. I had no room left for another truth. She turned the cup in her hands. When Thomas came home dead, I washed his shirt before burial. Halfway through, I realized I was angry at the cloth for not still being warm. The words sat between them like something breakable. Harlan said, when Ellen died, I kept thinking if I had ridden faster. Grief is greedy. It keeps changing the amount owed. Lena looked at him then. The loneliest thing in this world is not losing love. It is having no one left who remembers who you were before the loss. That truth sat between them like a live coal. He reached for her hand slowly enough to let her refuse. She did not. Her fingers were cool from the cup. His were rough with old rope scars. I remember, he said. Her eyes shone once. She did not look away. If this moment is moving you, then you are exactly who this story is for. A like and a subscribe tell us to keep making room for people the world leaves in the cold. The first shot shattered the shack window. Lamp glass burst. Eli screamed. Gabriel fired from the upper path. Men shouted below. Everything after happened fast. Harlan shoved Lena inside and dropped behind the hitch rail as bullets chewed the post apart. Creed had not waited for dawn. Fire lit at the canyon mouth where his men had thrown torches into dry brush. Horses screamed against the picket line. Upper path. Gabriel yelled. 2 climbers. Harlan ran for the slope. Shale slid under his boots. He caught himself with one hand, skin tearing, and kept going. A man rose at the lip with a carbine. Harlan hit him low, and they crashed in dust. Nate Purdy stared up at him from the ground. For one hot second, Harlan wanted to end every foolish thing Nate had chosen since morning. Instead, he ripped the gun away and threw it downslope. Go home if you still know where that is. Below them, brush fire raced toward the shack. Papers, Lena shouted. That was the choice. Horses or proof. Escape or the thing that might stop a war. Harlan saw Eli under the bunk. Gabriel covering the path. Lena with smoke around her shoulders and the treaty bundle half buried in shadow. He also saw Creed beyond the fire line, mounted and watching, wanting to witness his own victory. Harlan chose the papers. He slid down through sparks, plunged into the shack, wrapped the documents in a blanket, and shoved them under his shirt. Heat blasted his face. Smoke clawed his throat. He came out coughing blood taste and ash. Lena had already cut the horses loose. They bolted deeper into the canyon. Rear slot, Harlan yelled. He drove them toward the hidden gap behind the line shack. Eli and Amos first, then Lena, then the others. Bullets sparked off stone. Smoke thickened until the world was only heat and the scrape of boots. At the slot mouth, Harlan looked back once and saw Creed dismounting, coming inside the canyon himself because greed always wants to stand close enough to admire the ruin. Pride made him careless. Harlan fired at the old keg of lantern oil stored against the shack wall. The explosion was not large in a battlefield sense. In that canyon it was enough. Flame leapt. Roof timbers collapsed. Creed's horse reared. Men scattered. Burning beams sealed the entrance in a shower of sparks. Not dead, Harlan guessed, but delayed. They crawled out the rear wash onto the high side of the bluffs as dawn paled the east. Cold air hit them clean as river water. Behind them the canyon glowed like an opened forge. They rode hard for Red Willow and found Sheriff Vale waiting alone below the burial hill. No rifle in his hands. No deputies behind him. Just an old man on a tired horse who had finally chosen honesty. I know who shot Weller's horse, he said. Blacksmith told me Creed's foreman brought it in yesterday, and Weller left this under my porch before he died. He held out an oilcloth-wrapped ledger. Lena took it first. Brand entries. Yard receipts. James Barlow's hand all through. Miller's 6 had recorded at Creed's shipping yard 3 days before Creed ever reported them stolen. Gabriel stared at the pages. He started a war to hide rustling. Bill looked up at the burial hill. Men have done worse for less. Warmth returned in pieces after that. Amos washing ash from Eli's face. Gabriel binding Harlan's torn hand. Lena touching Willow's salve to the cut above Harlan's eye while the creek went on talking beside them. Lena drew something from her pocket then. Thomas Redbird's old brass scout token, polished thin from years of handling. She placed it in Harlan's palm. He carried that the winter he saved your life, she said. I can't take it. You can. I am tired of giving all my dead to anger. He closed his fingers around the token. Then let me give you something back. She looked at him steadily. What? The rest of my life, if you're willing to have the trouble of it. One corner of her mouth lifted, soft and real this time. Trouble I can manage. It is emptiness I've grown weary of. The danger was not gone. Creed still breathed. Town still held armed men. But the shape of things had changed. They rode into Buffalo Creek together by noon. Harlan with the ledger, Lena with the treaty papers, Gabriel and Amos behind, and Sheriff Vale wearing his badge because now he meant to earn it. The whole town stood at the courthouse. Creed was on the steps with one arm in a sling, soot dark in the lines of his face and fury finally plain where polish had been. He kidnapped officers, harbored. Creed began. They'll cut across him. Silas Creed, you are under arrest for the murder of Deputy Tom Weller, conspiracy to falsify territorial records, cattle theft, and incitement to unlawful violence. The crowd stirred like grass in wind. Creed laughed. On whose word? On yours, written down, Harlan said. He held up the ledger. Here are Miller's 6 head received in Creed's yard before the theft complaint. Here are altered brand notes. Here are Barlow's initials matching the false order. And I can show any man the white scar rings around the burns in Creed's south pens. A bad lie leaves a scar. That did it. Men stopped looking at Harlan and started looking at one another. Once people begin measuring their own shame, power starts to slip. Creed came down one stair. This country is moving toward progress whether some widow and one starving rancher like it or not. Lena stepped forward. Then let it move honest. Creed went for the pistol under his coat. He was fast. Harlan was ready for the kind of man who always believed the last word belonged to the one holding iron. He kicked the courthouse water bucket hard across the planks. It smashed into Creed's boots and threw him sideways. The shot went into the railing. Harlan hit him shoulder first. They crashed down the steps in dust and splintered paint. Creed fought close and ugly. He slammed his bad arm into Harlan's burned hand, and pain flashed white. Harlan nearly lost the hold. Then he thought of Ellen's orchard, Thomas on the travois, Eli in the river grass, the burial hill. No more. He trapped Creed's gun wrist against the step and drove his forehead down once. The pistol flew free. Creed clawed for a hidden knife. Left hand, Lena shouted. Harlan caught the wrist, twisted until the knife dropped, and pinned Creed face first into courthouse dust. Vale snapped irons on him before the crowd had finished gasping. Justice did not arrive with music. It came with witnesses and ledgers, and enough people finally ashamed to tell the truth. Barlow was caught before sunset. Miller identified his own steers in Creed's south pen by a split ear no iron could hide. Nate Purdy admitted he had heard Creed order Weller followed. By weeks, and a territorial judge voided the false order, restored the winter use agreement, and seized Creed's shipping yard. His bank seat vanished with the rest of his reputation. The practical world adjusted. Fences came down from the burial hill. The livery refilled its trough. Buffalo Creek remembered trade paid better than hatred. Some men never apologized, but they learned to lower their voices when Red Willow names were spoken. Harlan nearly lost his ranch anyway. Creed's friends called his note. So Amos sold hides. Gabriel brought horses for collateral, and Red Willow women hauled preserves, soap, shirts, and beadwork to market until a better bank in Sheridan bought the paper and cut the interest to something decent. By first snow, the barn roof was mended with lumber from Creed's seized yard. By Christmas, Harlan's table spent more nights in Lena's cabin than his own. In spring, they built a schoolhouse between the ranch and Red Willow. Months later, when the meadow turned thick again, Eli splashed barefoot through the shallows where the first shot had once struck water. Lena stood on the porch with a wash basket at her hip, calling that the boys would all catch their deaths in snowmelt. Harlan came up from the south pasture leading a mare gentle enough for children, Thomas's brass token warm against his chest. He looked at Lena, and she looked back with the steady peace earned only by people who know exactly what keeping costs. Strange how the hearts weathered worst are the ones that learn best how to keep a lamp for others. The creek moved silver through the meadow, and in the last light 2 horses stood nose to nose by the cottonwoods while the house at the bend kept its lamp burning for both worlds. Next time, stay with us for the story of a deaf seamstress sent west because her brothers called her useless, and the scarred ranch cook who was the first man patient enough to learn her hands before he ever asked for her heart.